Thank you for joining us today for Monster's webinar on recovering from the She-Cession. We're going to be focusing today on gender equity in a post-COVID world. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted women's careers. I think all of us know this firsthand, and that's why we're joined today. The industries hardest hit happen to also be predominantly ones in which women work. Plus, with millions of school children learning from home, it's most typically women who've put their work aside to assume extra caregiving and education support roles within the home. So we're eager to bring this topic to the forefront. First, I'd like to welcome you all to the session. I'm your host today. My name is Meg Goulet, and I am the marketing director for Monster. And Lou, if you might forward along to the next screen so everyone can see my lovely staged headshot compared to what I look like now. This was obviously when I was still in a work environment and not just sitting behind a wall here. But anyway, we have a great agenda lined up for you today. We are going to be kicking things off with our keynote speaker, Lou, who is running that presentation behind the scenes, and then we'll move on to our panel discussion. Our industry experts today will be diving into the different facets of recruiting and retaining women in the workforce. Lastly, we anticipate that this will inspire a lot of questions from the audience. We're already seeing some chats come in. Thank you very much. So we will be saving time later towards the end of the webinar to start answering those questions. Feel free to submit them throughout the webinar. Please use the Q&A button or even the chat feature at the bottom of your toolbar, and we will be trying our best to get through as many as possible. As mentioned, we have a great presentation for you today and a wonderful group of experts, and we want to make sure we spend some time with them too. So let's get started. So the pandemic revealed weak spots in our workforce foundations, spotlighting the fact that women lack the social and employer support needed to effectively balance the work and family responsibilities. And even those who have made progress and advanced to higher levels in the organization are now facing an uphill climb to catch back up to their colleagues, having had to scale back or even drop out of the workforce. Today's keynote will dig deeper into the true impact women are facing and what they're looking for in their next job. So Lou Goodman, welcome to the virtual stage. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Meg. Let me just turn my video on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today to talk about the current state of women in the workforce. Monster consistently polls the global workforce so we can get a frequent pulse on how to attract and retain the best talent. Because of this research, we have year-over-year data on the detailed influence that COVID has had on women worldwide. And we also look at research from other organisations. So you'll see a mix of stats to paint a complete picture of the true impact on women. So now we'll jump in and start talking about the current state of women in the workforce. In order to do the damage caused by COVID-19 to women in work, even by 2030, progress towards gender equality needs to be twice as fast as its historical rate. And many of us are experiencing the strain firsthand, but the actual impact when you look at the data is startling. According to the UN Women organization, women are overrepresented in many of the industries that have been hardest hit by COVID-19, such as food service, retail, and entertainment. For example, 40% of all employed women, that's 510 million women globally, work in hard-hit sectors, compared to 36.6% of employed men. In some countries, such as here in the UK, the full impact of job losses from COVID-19 is yet to be realised due to job retention schemes like the furlough here. But the furlough data shows that women are actually at greater risk of losing their jobs when these schemes come to an end. Between July and October 2020, a total of 15.3 million jobs were furloughed in the UK. To put this into context, before the pandemic, there were 27.1 million paid employees in the UK, which represented 84% employment. For furloughed jobs, which, as you can see, represents a very large proportion of the total jobs in the UK, for furloughed jobs for which gender was known, 52% of these were women's jobs, despite women only making up 48% of the workforce. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, about 4.3 million women in the US dropped out of the workforce between February and December last year. Worse yet, Of those who've dropped out, 2.1 million of them have given up looking for work altogether. And research from the US Census revealed that women between the ages of 25 and 44 were nearly 3 times more likely than men to say that COVID-related disruption of childcare was why they weren't working. This isn't a short-term issue either. There's also long-term ramifications for mothers leaving work entirely or cutting back on work, including a broken pipeline for higher level jobs and a loss of social security and other potential retirement income. Among those women who are still working, the mental load of having to do it all is really taking its toll. Mothers are more than 3 times as likely as fathers to be responsible for most of the housework and caregiving during the pandemic. And a recent Monster poll showed that only 38% of workers agree that their company is going far enough in supporting parents with children during COVID, with a massive 75% looking for better work flexibility. And nearly 70% of women who have experienced disruptions in their daily lives are concerned about the career growth, that their career growth may be limited as a result of this. As Claire Barnes, who you will be hearing more from later, has said, working where you live and living where you work truly adds tremendous stress to our day-to-day lives. And it's up to us as employers and HR leaders to provide for our people when they need it most. And what we've seen from some of the, from our research is that women express stress differently than men. Women have reported feeling more anxiety and have reported feeling higher rates of physical illness, such as headaches, and experiencing loneliness. In the US, women have experienced higher rates of depression and loneliness, while men in the US have experienced higher rates of physical illness. And depression has been reported across the board. And this anxiety and stress is leading to more fear when it comes to their jobs. So globally, women are less satisfied with their jobs than men, and they feel more insecure in their jobs as well. And this insecurity leads to a feeling of being less valuable than men. And this is reinforced by the fact that women earn less than men globally. Internationally, women earn 77 cents in every dollar for equal work. And that gap is even wider for women with children. There's also a promotion problem across the globe. Women only held 28% of managerial positions globally in 2019. And among Fortune 500 corporations, only 7.4% have CEOs. For women of colour, the reality is typically even more dismal. But even if women are employed, they struggle with seeking out new work as well. Monster data has found that fewer women have said that they feel comfortable that they have the transferable skills required to find a job at a different company or industry. And this was compared to, it was 83% of women said that, compared to 86% of men who said the same. And according to the World Economic Forum, 57% of women worldwide are at risk of being displaced by automation. And as per the McKinsey Global Institute data, an estimated 40 million to 160 million women will need reskilling to transition into the available jobs by 2030. And all of this pressure over the last year, coupled with the future ahead, is forcing women to their breaking point. As it relates to the on-demand work environment, nearly a third of women who feel they always need to be available are concerned that if they can't fulfill the need, this need to always be on, that their career progression may be impeded. And a great quote here from Betsy Stevenson, where people talk about how mums can lift a car off their children, but even if they can do that in that moment, it doesn't mean that they didn't damage their bodies by doing it. And she points out that if 2020 was like lifting a car off your kids, 2021 is going to have to be, how are those women able to heal? So now we're going to have a look at what do women need to stay happy and healthy. So workplace flexibility. If possible, women would prefer the option of workplace flexibility. However, actually, both men and women say that their ideal environment would be a hybrid of in-office and remote work. However, we understand that this isn't entirely feasible for all industries. The National Bureau of Economic Research found that 37% of jobs in the United States can be performed entirely at home, with significant variations across cities and industries. These jobs typically pay more than jobs that cannot be done at home and account for 46% of all US wages. But there are other ways to help meet women's needs, such as looking at gender pay equity. In a recent Monster survey, 74% of women found that believe that there is a pay gap at their company, while 73% of men believe that there isn't. This is an absolute startling difference between these perceptions compared to the reality. But the good news is that what we also found in our survey was that 4 in 10 employers are prioritizing gender pay equality, which is a great start, but the World Economic Forum 2020 Global Gender Gap Report found that it will take nearly 100 years before we see gender parity. And as we discussed, there are legitimate fears around transferable skills and the risk of job displacement through automation. And 38% of women have said that they want employee training. They want training and development opportunities that can help women get back into the workforce. According to PwC, 2/3 of working women actually work beneath their potential. This is not only an appetite for training and development, but a real opportunity for women to not only be more productive, but also be more satisfied in the workplace. So how can companies better support women? We've got a few ideas here. So lead by example, make sure that we're acknowledging gender bias, help women to see their worth through, gender pay equity, as well as acknowledgement and feedback. Keep flexible work policies going after the pandemic. Once we move out of the pandemic, these could have fantastic benefits to help women be more productive. Offer strong benefits and support, rethink roles and job descriptions, and have a commitment to tackle gender equity from all sides. So these are a few suggestions about how companies can better support women, but let's hear from our expert panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou. We really appreciate this. We try to keep all of the data impactful but brief so we can spend a lot of time talking to our expert panelists. But of course, if you had any questions about the data, feel free to keep sending your questions in through the Q&A in your toolbar or through the chat. We've already seen a few of these come in. And one common question we've seen is about whether the statistics will be shared. Yes, we'll be sharing the presentation the day after. We did not have the sources on the slides. However, we will add them prior to sending out. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our expert panelists today. We have Claire Barnes. She is the Chief Human Capital Officer here at Monster. Monica Perotti, she's the Director of Global Executive Recruitment and Talent Acquisition at Hilton. Layla O'Kane is our Research Manager for Burning Glass Technologies, and Michelle Rasmussen is the Vice President of Human Resources at Ferrovial Services North America. Welcome, everyone. So what I'm going to ask today is that all of our panelists get on camera. We can stop sharing the slides, so I want to make sure everybody can see. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you have the option to change from speaker view to gallery view. Please do so at this time, just so we can make sure that we're seeing everybody and we're having a true virtual discussion. All right, so thank you very much. So let's start it off with a few questions here. We still have a lot of great stats to share, so let's get through them. Recent projections based on economic scenarios modeled by McKinsey and Oxford Economics estimate that employment for women may not recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2024, which is 2 full years after recovery for men. So based on the data that we just reviewed, Layla, do you feel like these trends will continue for the years to come?
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we saw a pretty a lot of dismal stats about women in the workplace during COVID times. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that is just basically trends that were already present pre-COVID that have essentially been exacerbated by current economic conditions. So especially looking at jobs that are at risk of being automated away, that's something that was happening pre-COVID. And, during COVID, I think with a lot of layoffs and furloughs, some employers realized that they had this opportunity to potentially automate even more. And I know we think traditionally that affects a lot of sort of male-dominated industries like manufacturing, but it actually really affects a lot of industries in which there are a lot of women who are employed. So things like retail and cashier jobs and administrative assistant jobs. So I think it's not to say that the trends will necessarily fully continue, but I think those trends are likely to continue. I think on the upside, we've kind of seen this shift towards remote work. And one of the great things is that that's a great opportunity to be able to continue that in the longer term and potentially retain more women in the workplace because you're offering that as an option to your employees.
Great. Thank you, Layla. Claire, do you have any other thoughts to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Layla has been saying. I think we're at a point where there's a risk that it will continue far beyond 2024. And the progress that we did make, albeit not enough progress pre-pandemic, we've reversed that progress. And so I think all organizations need to really be taking this seriously and having a conversation about what can we be doing to support women in the workplace. And to Layla's point around flexible working or working from home, I think for organizations considering what happens post-pandemic or when we're in a position where we are able to return to the office, how are we going to ensure that culture of flexibility remains so that it's attractive for women and that they feel as though it's not something they have to ask for? Because I think one of the main concerns when you're a woman, you're a parent, you have childcare responsibilities, you're trying to do everything, that feeling of, I don't want to be the person that's different to everyone else, that's asking for something which a man isn't going to ask for. And so my boss thinks that I'm going to be difficult about it. Of course, most companies don't think that, but that as a woman, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And so I think companies ensuring that they're thinking about things like flexibility and support for women post-pandemic is crucial to ensuring that this doesn't continue for years to come. I mean, 2024 is stark enough, right?
Great point. Now, Claire, I'm going to stay with you for a second. Can you talk about what best practices you've actually employed to create flexibility for women at work?
Yeah, sure. So at Monster, we do a number of different things, but during the pandemic, I think one of the things that's really helped us is that we regularly survey our employees. So we have an engagement survey that we run. Actually, during the pandemic, we run it every couple of weeks, a very short survey. Now we run it monthly, but it really gives us a window into what our employees are feeling and what they need from us. We also run very transparent Ask Me Anything sessions as a leadership team. And that gave us really helpful feedback to understand how our employees are struggling and what we could be doing to create a better support mechanism for all employees, including women in the workforce. So we launched a program last year called One Monster, One Family, which really promoted a number of sort of family-friendly initiatives. So first of all, we partner with care.com so that employees can seek out qualified tutors, sitters, elder care, also emergency backup care if they need it. We also really promote flexible working and we try and lead by example. So for example, I'm the head of HR, I have an 8-year-old daughter. I constantly talk about the fact that during the pandemic, I had to squash all my meetings into half of the day and sit and homeschool her for half of the day. And that meant I might have been online later in the evening than I ordinarily would have been, but that's fine. I had the support of the company. And I think you really have to role model that behavior and demonstrate it's part of the culture to expect flexibility. And we did things like ensuring in the US that benefits were still available to employees who were on part-time hours. So if you did reduce your hours as part of the sort of responsibilities that were occurring through having to support others during the pandemic and beyond, it's a permanent change, you're still eligible for benefits. We gave away things like self-care days. So I appreciate people are under an incredible amount of pressure, and just having the opportunity to take extra time off for themselves when they need it was really important. And then really little things like reducing meeting times. So as a mum, if I'm sitting next to my daughter and I'm having to try and set up meetings for her at school, and I'm trying to set up meetings for myself, just having like 5 or 10 minutes at the top and bottom of every hour hugely helps me, or just helps me keep sane, right? To be able to get them a drink or a snack or something like that. And it costs the company it doesn't cost the company any money. In fact, actually, it makes us all a bit more efficient in the way that we work. So we introduced a lot of those initiatives. The other thing we did was we tried to bring our parents and caregivers together. So we launched an ERG, which we call PAC, which was for parents and caregivers, really to sort of provide support to each other. It could be that they go on and, have a bit of a moan about how tough their day has been, which is fine, but also it provided resources to them to help, have their children engaged in activities or different ways that they've found that have been useful for support during the pandemic. So we did a lot of different things, but it was really based on the feedback that we had from our employees.
That's great. Thank you. It's a lot going on.
Yes.
Now, Michelle, I know that you're doing great things as well. I'd love to hear from you too.
Well, it's funny because I was like taking notes. I was like, oh my gosh, Claire, those are some great ideas. I know that what we've done is we really tried to make this a community, right? Because we're all so isolated. And so what I did with my team is I started to have these daily huddles, and I have 3 separate teams, but every day I meet with those individual teams, and it may be 20 minutes, it may be longer, an hour a day, but regardless, we did this since COVID. And we're on camera. So I made him get up early, get dressed up, be on camera. And it was really fantastic. I didn't even realize what impact this would have a year later. But these teams are so far gelled. We know each other's animals, and we know the barkingness, and we know the bad internet connections. We know what we're doing over the weekend. And I think this idea of being connected to each other as women has helped us so much. We can identify in a second, hey, are you okay today? And I just had an employee that was like, I got this migraine. And so the whole team was jumping in to say, oh, this is what I do when I have a migraine. And then pretty soon, because we're cross-trained, somebody else had offered to take their workload for a couple hours. So I think that's a big thing that we did, is try to get people connected.
That's a really great point. I think that would also, help to minimize more women leaving the workforce. We have another crazy stat here that was talking about 1 in 4 women are now considering leaving the workplace or downshifting their careers. And a lot of it is just what we talked about during, Lou's presentation, that mental workload, right? The trying to take it all on. And I think we're all the first to admit that we're probably harder on ourselves than our bosses, our managers, or even our companies. There's probably a lot of flexibility out there if only we learn to ask more. So actually, Monica, I'd love to go to you. Can you talk a little bit about specific policies that that Hilton is doing currently, or ones that you have heard of that could help with women?
Yes, I think that some of them have already been mentioned, but true flexibility is the most important, right? We can't say that having Wednesday afternoons off is flexibility, because it looks different for everyone based on their personal circumstances. So at Hilton, we've always led with our culture and our values, but Maya Angelou has a quote that's one of my favorites, is when you know better, you do better. And at Hilton, probably we've been impacted the most out of anybody on this call. It has been a really rough year for us in the industry, but there are some great things that have come from that. And I think that our culture has become even better. We led with that before, and now it's even more, because we've added a lot of empathy and grace in huge amounts that we may or may not have in this amount before. So our leaders are being educated on the importance of women, and that we don't want them to feel that if they take a step aside, that they're taking a step back. We've offered sabbatical programs, 30, 60, 90 days. And if they need longer, we are really educating on true flexibility. And I have some clients in marketing, which is huge for us. They've said, I would have lost these incredible leaders if we hadn't offered these programs and given them that 90-day time to go figure out other childcare options, since the daycares aren't open and things like that. So reduced work weeks are really important for us as well. But making sure that our culture is judging on people's output, what they're able to do, what their contribution is, and the value that they bring to the organization, that is much more important than the hours that they work. And we all used to be guilty of looking on Teams to see if people are working or online and why are they not online. We don't do that anymore. We truly understand that my busy time, I might be able to work 9 to 5 because I have teenagers, or not that I ever get to work just 9 to 5, but I have teenagers, so mine is easier. But the people on my team who have smaller children who are also doing homeschooling, I know that they may not get something turned around to me or respond to an email or until 8, 9, or 10 o'clock at night when their children are in bed. And we're okay with that. And we really want women that are in our organization and ones that I am able to recruit in to understand that we get it, that we understand, we have empathy, and we value what you bring in leadership. Our customers require that there are women sitting at the table making those decisions, because there are women who are clients and customers probably for all of us on this call. So we absolutely cannot lose that leadership. So we have to continue to educate within our organization, as HR consultants and recruiters. It's our job to educate those that may not be in the situation, who may not be impacted by the pandemic, what it looks like. And that is truly one of the blessings in all of this, is that we now understand the impacts that working women have in their careers, not just during the pandemic, they're just amplified now, but we can have a better understanding and awareness of them. And that is as something that's been great from all of this.
Wonderful. Yes, that idea of true flexibility. Layla, do you have anything to add?
I think I'll just quickly add that, I don't come from an HR perspective, so I don't have as many great policies as the other folks on this panel have already mentioned, but I'll just say that I think there was a question about how do you make sure that you're doing this with remote work if it's the case that, people who are in the office might get more recognition or might get sort of a little bit more visibility into their work. And I think, that comes with creating this culture of being really in communication with each other, even if you're far away from each other physically. And I think Michelle kind of touched upon that. But I think, in my workplace, we use Microsoft Teams in a very kind of casual conversational manner. And I think that really helps us to feel like, I can tap someone on the shoulder via Teams, even if it's not in person. And I think creating those opportunities virtually is going to help mitigate sort of differential effects by gender as we move forward in this remote space. The last thing I'll just add is that, as people become more remote, one of the things I think is going to also become more important is this idea of having sort of sponsors. So not just mentors and not just advisors, but sponsors in your company who will go to bat for you and advocate for you. And I think women in particular can really take advantage of that and really use that to their sort of further their career.
That's a great point. And also trying to find women in leadership positions who can help be your sponsor and to help guide, someone who has paved the way already and can help the next generation of women succeed. Monica, I'd like to go back to you for a second. A lot of what we heard is a long-term impact that women are going to see here by stepping off that ladder right now. And they might not be able to climb as high when they get back into the workforce. So even pre-COVID, only 1 in 5 direct reports to a CEO in corporations for a woman, and only 1 in 30 was actually a woman of color. So how do you continue to advocate for and recruit women in leadership positions, especially if they've taken a leave of absence?
I think some of the points that I said already, it's, understanding the value that women leadership brings to any organization. And, I've found when I've gone to recruit talent that I've stayed in touch with, that I've, been networking with, that I would love to bring on board to our company. And when I call them, they're like, I just don't know that I can make a change right now because I, have a child at home and I'm not able to work, as many hours. And I don't know if I were to start a new position that I could provide as much as, I could before the pandemic. So I think it's making sure that we are good ambassadors of what each and one of our organizations are and the culture that we have and how much we value women leadership to our companies and giving them that confidence. I've seen, a definite shift in women's confidence and the ability to be viewed as a great leader when I call them because they have these issues of childcare and those types of things at home. So again, I have to lead as an external, voice for our company with what our culture is and how their voice matters and they matter to us, and that we are willing to truly be flexible, and that we have these other programs if they need to move forward. We have an executive in APAC that, with some personal circumstances, said that they needed to scale back. And we asked what that looked like. And it actually ended up being about 10% that they were able to offer. But this person was so valuable that 10%, we were willing to have that because their value was that much. They've since come back full time and just received a promotion, and which is amazing. So while this person stepped aside, they did not step back. And we have to make sure that women hear that in our culture. And as recruiters and HR partners, that we're continuing to educate our clients that this, why it matters, and to explain that side, and to really openly have conversations about, when we might see some bias. We are consultants in HR and recruitment, and it's our job to be that voice for them. And I hope that all of us on this call really acknowledge that I think women's confidence and their value right now is impacted in every way. I know even for myself, I don't sometimes feel that I'm being as good of a mom or as good of an employee, and you have all of these pressures and they're all intermixed much more than they used to be. It used to be more of a separate work and separate home, and they're all together. The kids are all at home. So we have to show ourselves some grace first, and then we have to show grace within our teams and our companies, and we have to teach all the leaders to show grace and why it matters.
I love that. I think I'm going to steal that phrase, Monica, about showing grace. I think that's a great way to approach it and look at it. Side comment is that I've been reading a lot about the connections between physical and emotional through reward as well as pain. And some companies don't have the opportunity to promote or provide raises to women to demonstrate their value. And yet there is actual physical connection that shows just acknowledging, complimenting, thanking them for their work can actually have a similar rewarding impact into the day-to-day lives of women. So just something to keep in mind for people that are attending. If you feel as though you can't provide as much as you think that you can, saying thank you, showing grace will actually go a very long way in terms of retaining women. Michelle, was there anything that you wanted to add about recruiting and advocating for women in leadership positions?
I know that my best advice is really to help advocate. Like, I like to mentor and train up because, people that are starting in new for our company, that's our future. And so, I have a young girl that I've been working on with a couple of years. And when she first came to me, she was, very just out of school, knew everything. And she was able to be resilient and be coached and learn. And I was able to give her different assignments, keep encouraging her. And now she has this fantastic, confident voice that she's able to bring great value to. And it's funny because a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have predicted where she would go, but now she's going to go straight up. And it really is because someone believed in her.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And it's hard for women because many of them don't even get to that opportunity level, right? Through the candidate process, they might not make it to the final stage. There's this phrase going around, two in the pool, and about the percentage of women that are more likely to be hired by considering in that final round of candidacy. I think here it is, having two in the pool of final candidates increases the chance of a woman being hired by almost 80%, 79.4%. Claire, I'm going to go to you for a bit of a controversial question here. What are your thoughts on encouraging or even mandating diversity candidates to be in the final consideration?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's one that we've thought about a lot at Monster. I think on a very basic level, we know from research that humans, whether consciously or not, and I think a lot of the time it's unconsciously, have a natural inclination to surround themselves with people who are similar to them, whether it's how they act, how they look. So I think one of the triggers which mandating some kind of diverse pool is to stop that happening, right? To stop you from hiring people who are similar to you. And I think there is definitely some, something warranted in that, but I don't think it's enough on its own. I think to the points which the other panelists have raised, a lot of it's about educating our managers so they understand the value of diversity. I mean, as a woman, I would be offended if someone hired me because I was a woman and not because I was the best person for the job. And so what we need to do is ensure, as a talent acquisition team, we are looking in a number of different places to ensure we're hiring and we are bringing candidates in from lots of different diverse pools, including people of color, including women, the LGBT community, because we know that having a diverse workforce increases productivity, increases innovation, and ultimately increases revenue and financial gain in an organization. I think we have to educate our hiring managers and our employees on the value of diversity. Yes, and actually at Monster, we are implementing that, where we ensure we have candidates on every hiring slate who are diverse. But in isolation, I don't think it's enough. I think it has to be a full, development and constant checking ourselves, right? Why are we doing this? What are the reasons we're doing this for? And how is it going to benefit our organization? And our managers need to understand that. It's the same with internal promotions. I know that you talked about it before, Meg, but it's just as important in our internal discussions. We know statistically women, when they look at a job description, are more likely to see the things they can't do, and a man is more likely to see the things they can. So we have to be the voice that encourages them and says, actually, you have the skills, you should apply for this job. And we have to notice when they're not. So it's much more, I think, detailed than just saying we need to have a diverse slate. I think it's all encompassing.
That's a great response. Understand. Great. Thank you. So finally, before we move into our attendee questions, let's talk about burnout. It's something that we talked about quite a bit in the presentation, a lot of startling statistics about the anxiety, depression, and loneliness that women are feeling. There is a skew generally towards women with children, but women without children also are facing burnout too. And, Claire, to your point about parents and caregivers, that caregivers part is also very important because some people are caring for their elderly parents, their neighbors, their friends, and even those that don't have or not parents or caregivers still are taking on additional challenges. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll open it up to whoever would like to jump in. How do you combat just general burnout of balancing work and life? Anyone want to take a stab?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to recognize that it's a real issue. And I take the point, and I noticed on the chat that somebody had raised, and quite rightly, not all women have children. This isn't just about women who have children. And I completely agree with that. I think it's about supporting women and making an environment which all employees feel as though they want to work in. So it's about inclusivity versus, we need to do all of these things so that women want to work for us and forget about men or forget about other diverse groups. It's about an inclusive environment. So from a burnout perspective, I think, there are things you could do, which include obviously paid programs which you can use. But I personally think things like talking about it, saying to employees, we know this is tough. We know you're having a tough time. You are looking after sick relatives. You have lost friends or relatives during this pandemic or colleagues. And it's tough. And if you need to take time out, or if you need to, finish work early for a day or two, just to get some time back to yourself, that's okay. I think it goes back to that flexibility point. I think it also goes back to the point of making that conversation, or making employees feel as though that conversation is something they can comfortably have with their manager. So talking at a leadership level about how we're feeling, right? Saying, actually, I'm exhausted. I haven't had a holiday in 12 months. And frankly, I can't wait to get on a plane. But that's joking aside. But talking openly about that and saying, it's okay. We want you to talk about it. We want to know really how you're doing. And I was on a webinar yesterday. I wasn't on the panel. I was watching it. And somebody said, when you talk to someone, ask them how they are, that they will give an instinctive response, and they'll say, I'm good, I'm fine. We all do it. but then ask them again, no, how are you? Tell me how you're really feeling. And just taking the time to do that. So that checking in that I think Michelle was talking about when she talked about huddling, having people huddle together and talk about how they're doing. So important, recognizing it. There's lots of things employers can do which don't cost anything to support employees who are feeling burnt out.
I agree. And I think, thrive culture is important. And again, you said it, not all women have children. And this is something that impacts everyone. And mental health needs to be a topic in companies that it's okay to talk about and that programs are initiated. It's been a tough year, whether you have children, no matter what, it's just been a heavy year. And conversations with your teams need to be about what you're doing to take care of yourself, what you're doing that brings you joy, whether it's simply taking a walk during the day, whether it's getting up and watching the sunrise or reading a great book. People need to be reminded to find ways to bring them joy. And, the benefit in that is that people are going to perform better when they know it's okay to take time off, to pause, to find things that bring them joy. And I think that it needs to be part of conversations even more than it was in the past. I've tried to make a bigger effort with my team as well. And, I hope that we'll continue to roll out more mental health programs and be able to talk about them. But it's been a tough year, regardless of gender or anything else. I know in my space, and we all have COVID fatigue for sure, it has been a really challenging year for us. And we need to acknowledge that and take care of our team members, which are the heart and soul of everything that we do.
Yeah, and if I can add, Monica and Claire, I like your points. And I think a point to add is really about making meaningful work and being able to have a correlation with your teams on the work that you're doing is important. Because I think that helps us not to get in that burnout space if what we're doing is important and enriched and supported.
I think I'll just quickly add, Monica had mentioned earlier on in our panel about sort of this default of flexibility. And I think the default is important. So making sure that it's on an opt-in experience for mental health days or for some of these other things, but that it's the default applied to everybody so that you make sure you're not seeing sort of those differences in who's feeling able to take you up on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to jump in too. There was a question that kind of tailored into this. I think we've actually probably answered it. But talking about the generational gaps too, and it seems like what all of you women have suggested is that the care and the questions that you're asking are not specific to mothers or to caregivers, or even young versus old. So someone had written in about being a younger mother where a lot of people that she works with are parents of teenagers, and seeing that generational gap. And it's very important. Asking someone how their day is just as relevant to a younger generation than an older generation too.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. So we're getting more questions in. Please keep submitting them. We'll try to get to as many as possible. One said, could you give some examples of transferable skills that you think women should either develop or use to change their career and find a new job?
I can talk about this a little bit. So one of the things that I look at a lot are things like transferable skills, and that's going to change a little bit by different industries. And so I'll just caveat with that. But I think one thing we're seeing a lot in my research is a big uptick of data visualization skills. So people are not only interested in these kind of like core STEM programming skills that I think the universe has said everyone should, go to a data boot camp and become a programmer for a while, but it's really this connection of the visuals and connecting whatever those analytics are to being able to communicate that to others. And I think that's something that's really transferable across a wide range of industries, and that we're seeing sort of an increase across a bunch of different types of occupations is these visualization skills. And the other one is social media skills. So, different types of social media skills have been on the rise for a while. I think we've all kind of learned them in the last 10 years ourselves. And those are becoming more important in a wider range of jobs. So, jobs like recruiting, you all probably know better than I do, but that uses social media in a way that it didn't at all really, 10 or 15 years ago. And so those types of skills are sort of infiltrating a wider range of occupations. So that's kind of where I would start.
I think for me, I would look towards skills of resilience, of grit, of determination. I can teach you technical skills. I can't teach attitude. I can't teach you to be able to go Google something or, search on something to kind of figure things out. And I think in my industry, that's what sets people apart, is their willingness to work in these uncertain times with maybe shady systems. And how do you rise above all that?
We are seeing a lot of questions coming in from people who work for companies that unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's part of their industry, right? That they do not offer remote work. Some are able to offer a hybrid approach, but some must be in office from 9 to 5, or if they're in light industrial manufacturing, they must go in for work. Any thoughts on how you can continue to support these women without offering the flexible hours that they might require? Another tough one.
It is a tough one. I know that in our business, we have both. So we have the corporate office is really remote, but the rest of our sites are working on the sites. And some of the things that we've done is, maybe done some job sharing, done some rotating shifts. And really, I think it's about thinking outside the box. And when you say, I don't have those shifts available, well, is that because it's an 8 to 5 shift? Could we do a split shift? And could you come in an 8 to 12 and then go do a 5 to 9 later? So I really think it's about how can we put our heads together and think of something creative?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same. We've experienced similar with our customer service representatives, and how do we support flexibility for them? And I agree. I think it's thinking outside the box and just challenging the norms which our managers are used to working with, because it does mean you have to think differently or you have to be organized in a different way. But actually, ordinarily, it boosts productivity, and our employees are so grateful for us offering that. So I think I would agree completely with Michelle. I think try and think outside the box and think about what options there are around shift patterns and around flexibility within the office.
Another interesting question we've received, given high unemployment, why do you think that women who are employed feel insecure or aren't satisfied with their jobs? I think the insight here would be that they would just be pleased to be employed when so much more goes into that.
I mean, I feel like we give ourselves a hard time, right? And we're trying to do so much, whether you're a parent, you're looking after someone else, whether you're, delivering food to your neighbor, you're trying to do everything at once. And that means you might not be able to do everything as well as you could under normal circumstances. So I think that insecurity comes from us thinking, if I can't give everything to my job or to my home, what does that mean for my career long term? And so it's that worry of, what is this situation doing to my career? That's how I view it. And I think for all circumstances of women, that's an issue at the moment.
And I think just that in general, because high, employment is high, people are afraid that if they can't work as hard or as much or overwork or always be on, that they are able to be easily replaced, because there's people out there not having these issues from the pandemic in the same way. So I think it puts a pressure and rocks people's confidence in some ways, because they think that they are more replaceable in today's current climate than maybe in the past. And as she pointed out, we are hard on ourselves, and, we do always want to deliver. And, most of these people that are impacted by the pandemic right now are used to, under promising and over delivering. And I think they're finding themselves in the reverse sometimes and worried about what those consequences might be. So I think it, again, just boils back to feeling comfortable in a company's culture to voice what you can and can't do, and coming up with solutions and being truly flexible. But I think that it affects people's confidence, whether they're not working and there are thoughts that they can get a job, or that they should change jobs, or if they're qualified to apply for a job that they'd see, they're like, oh, I'd love to apply for that, but right now I just can't deliver the way I used to. I think everyone's confidence is impacted right now. And again, that's where the grace comes in, and helping mentor and sponsor and advocate for, and acknowledge that there are some real issues right now that we need to address.
And just to add a bit more context to that insight, what was interesting was around the job satisfaction stat, was that job satisfaction for men and women had both gone up since, year on year, which I think that does explain that people are probably, you know, if they're in a job, maybe feeling more grateful and not, you know, not as dissatisfied. But what it was actually the previous year, men and women's satisfaction was comparable, but men were more satisfied with their jobs than women were. So it had gone up for both, but men had gone up even further, and so it actually pulled apart. Which I think that talks to the fact that around now, yes, people are feeling higher satisfaction, but it has pulled apart, and which is probably explained by all of the things that we've covered during this.
And I think we have time for about one or two more questions. Someone had wrote in, we talked a lot about how we can support women in terms of creating ERGs, mentorships, etc. This person's actually coming at it from a step before that, creating that trust first, that openness to make sure that women feel like they have, they refer to it as psychological safety, to have somebody to go to. How do you first, you know, all of you have gone so far in your progress, how did you start in terms of creating that trust? Monica, you say culture quite a bit. How do you start with that to create that inclusive environment for women? You know, thinking back now, right? To when all this started.
I mean, like for me, I think you need to have allies, right? As women, we can't do this on our own. We need allies, supporters, male supporters. I think that at the fundamental, if we're going to change a culture, it needs to be something which an organization and a leadership team all support and buy into. And so it's very difficult to do that as a woman or as a group of women on your own. So I think it's about explaining and educating, explaining why it's important and explaining how it feels. Because if you're not in a situation, you know, I'm not a person of color, I can't speak to how it feels to be a person of color. It's the same for a man. They don't know how it feels to be a woman and what we're experiencing. So I do feel the very starting point of that is having the conversation and just really highlighting why it's important. And, you know, for cultures and for organizations who don't see that, personally, I would say show them the figures, show them why it's important to the top and bottom line of an organization, show them how they can benefit financially, because that normally will start to make them think, okay, actually, I need to listen and we need to do something about that. But I think that's where it probably starts from.
For me, I think it's that trust, right? It's that learning organization that it's okay to fail. And I think the ownership is on leaders to be able to model that. Like, hey, I screwed up, calling it first. If somebody else says that they screwed up, be okay to say publicly, hey, it's okay, let's learn from it. I think we do a lot of after action reviews, and it kind of helps us to get in this mindset, like we're going to stumble, it's okay, but how do we fix it so we can go forward? So I think the basis of this psychological trust is it's okay to be vulnerable and be authentic.
Great. Well, in the spirit, was there anything else to add?
Yeah, I was going to just be quick. You know, I think networking is worth its weight in gold. You know, that's essentially what we're doing here. You know, we're sharing what works for our company and our culture during this. And even if someone hasn't taken that next step to officially have a mentorship or sponsorship, you know, there's so many ways to go out and network with peers from other companies or someone who's you've watched or noticed on LinkedIn that they've taken that next step. So networking to help you get ideas, to get confidence, to learn is a great way to do it until you do have that official mentorship within your organization. And networking is key.
Great point. So in the spirit of wrapping up early and giving a few minutes back to your busy days, we are going to end the webinar now. Thank you so much to our expert panelists. Really appreciate your insight. I'm sure that a lot of people were taking notes, but if you missed anything, tomorrow we will be sending out a recording of this webinar as well as the full deck with sources, so you can really dig into those insights. Thank you for being such an engaged audience, and we really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everyone.